I'm Margaret Caldwell, 78 years old, a woman who has lived long enough to know that the quietest hearts can wage the fiercest wars. And my war began the day my grandson's fiancée canceled their wedding for the third time while he paid for everything. I am the woman who uncovered her secret, and I am the one who turned her perfectly curated life into well-deserved chaos. My story doesn't begin with anger, but with love. A love as deep and steady as the old oak tree my late husband, Robert, planted in our backyard the day our daughter was born. Robert was the architect of our family, and I the librarian. He built the foundations, and I filled them with stories, with knowledge, with warmth. When he passed away 10 years ago, he left behind more than just a comfortable home and a healthy savings account. He left a legacy of integrity. That legacy was passed down to our daughter, and through her to my only grandson, Leo. Leo Vance is the light of my later years. He has Robert's kind eyes and my penchant for getting lost in a good book. He is a good man, a software engineer with a brilliant mind and a heart perhaps a little too soft for this modern world. After Robert's passing, a significant portion of his estate was placed in a trust for Leo to be accessed when he turned 30. It was meant to be the foundation for his own family, a launchpad for a life of security and happiness. Robert always said, Maggie, money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys choices. Give the boy choices. Leo turned 30, and a few months later, he brought Serafina Monet home. The first time I met her, she was like a creature from another world. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes the blue of a summer sky. She spoke in a breathless, effervescent way that made everything sound like a delightful secret. She was a social media influencer, a job I didn't entirely understand, which seemed to involve taking beautiful pictures of herself in beautiful places with beautiful things. She doted on Leo, hanging on his every word, her laughter echoing through my quiet house like a wind chime. Leo was utterly bewitched. He looked at her the way I used to see Robert look at me, and for that reason alone I wanted to love her. But there was a dissonance I couldn't shake. Her eyes, though bright, never seemed to fully land on you. They were always scanning, assessing. Her compliments felt less like genuine admiration and more like expertly deployed tools. When she admired my antique porcelain collection, she didn't ask about its history, but about its appraisal value. I brushed it off as the bluntness of a younger generation. I told myself I was just a protective old woman, wary of anyone holding my grandson's heart. The first wedding was planned for a June afternoon at a lavish botanical garden. Leo, bless his heart, wanted to give her the world. He liquidated a significant portion of his trust to pay for it all up front: the venue, the celebrity caterer, the designer gown from Paris. 2 weeks before the big day, Serafina called off the wedding in a flurry of tears. Her beloved aunt, she wailed over the phone to Leo, had been diagnosed with a rare, aggressive illness, and she simply couldn't fathom walking down the aisle while her favorite person in the world was suffering. Leo was heartbroken but stoic. It's the right thing to do, Grandma, he told me, his voice heavy. Family comes first, that's one of the reasons I love her so much. The deposits, of course, were non-refundable, a sum that could have been a down payment on a house gone. I asked to send flowers to her aunt, perhaps a card. Serafina became evasive. Oh, she's very private, she'd said. We're handling it within the immediate family. I never heard another word about the sick aunt. Within a month, Serafina's social media was full of smiling pictures from a luxury, healing retreat in Bali, which Leo had also paid for. The second attempt was 6 months later. A winter wedding this time at a ski resort in Aspen. It was to be smaller, more intimate, Serafina had claimed, though the budget seemed just as astronomical. Leo, ever hopeful, opened his heart and his wallet once more. This time the cancellation came a mere 72 hours before the ceremony. The reason was a catastrophic falling out with her maid of honor, her oldest and dearest friend. According to Serafina's dramatic retelling, the friend had betrayed her in a way so profound, so soul-crushing, that the entire wedding was tainted with negative energy. I can't start my forever with Leo under such a dark cloud, can I? She had sobbed to him. He, in turn, relayed the story to me with righteous anger on her behalf. He had already paid for the flights and lodging for the entire wedding party. Another fortune vanished into thin air. When I gently questioned the logic of canceling a $500,000 event over a spat with a friend, Leo became defensive. You don't understand, Grandma. Serafina is a very sensitive, spiritual person. These things affect her deeply. You're being too cynical. His words stung more than he could ever know. Cynical, perhaps I was, but Robert had been a man of his word, a man who faced hardship head-on. He didn't run from dark clouds, he built a stronger roof. This pattern of behavior of manufactured drama resulting in catastrophic financial loss for Leo wasn't sensitivity. It was a finely tuned performance, and my grandson was its sole captive audience. I was just the old woman in the back row, the one who could see the strings. Hope, I've learned, can be a stubborn and foolish thing. 8 months after the Aspen fiasco, Leo announced the third wedding. My heart sank like a stone in a well. This time it was to be a destination wedding on the Amalfi Coast in Italy. Serafina, he explained, needed to reclaim her narrative and create a purely positive memory, far away from the bad energy of their past attempts. The cost was obscene. Leo had to sell a portfolio of stocks his grandfather had carefully cultivated for him over decades. "It's the last time, Grandma," he promised, his face earnest. She swore it. "This one is for good. Third time's the charm, right?" I wanted to believe him. Oh, how I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to see him happy, to see him build the life Robert and I had always wished for him. So I packed my suitcase, bought a new dress in a sensible shade of navy blue, and prepared to fly to Italy. I even allowed myself a sliver of optimism. Maybe she had grown up. Maybe the gravity of a third attempt had finally impressed upon her the seriousness of the commitment. The days leading up to our departure were a whirlwind of activity. Serafina's social media was a masterclass in performative excitement. There were artistic photos of her wedding shoes, a close-up of the embossed invitations, a candid shot of her and Leo laughing over a map of Italy. Her captions were filled with saccharine prose about destiny, soulmates, and the universe finally aligning. Each post garnered thousands of likes and fawning comments from her followers, all praising their epic love story. To me, it felt less like a love story and more like a marketing campaign. We arrived in Positano 2 days before the ceremony. The villa Leo had rented was perched on a cliffside, a stunning cascade of terracotta and bougainvillea with a panoramic view of the glittering sea. It was breathtakingly beautiful and breathtakingly expensive. Serafina was in her element, directing her personal photographer, orchestrating group photos, and holding court among the small party of friends they'd flown out. She was radiant, charming, and utterly in control. Leo just watched her, his face a mask of pure adoration. The day before the wedding, I was sitting on the terrace reading a novel when the first tremor of disaster struck. It came in the form of a phone call. Serafina took it by the pool, and even from a distance I could see her posture change. The breezy confidence evaporated, replaced by a rigid tension. She walked to the far end of the terrace, her voice a low, urgent murmur. After about 20 minutes, she returned to the group, her face pale, her eyes wide with a practiced horror. She found Leo and pulled him aside. I couldn't hear their words, only the rising and falling of their voices, her frantic whispers, his soothing replies that grew more and more distressed. Finally, she let out a theatrical gasp and collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The party came to a halt. Everyone stared, their expressions a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Leo, his arm wrapped around the heaving shoulders of his fiancée, addressed the small crowd. His voice was strained, thick with emotion. "There's been an emergency. Serafina's business manager, he's just been in a terrible accident. He's in a coma. He's not just her manager, he's her mentor, the man who discovered her. She can't do this. Not now." The silence that followed was heavy and awkward. Serafina, lifting her tear-streaked face from Leo's chest, looked around at the guests. "I'm so sorry," she wept. "I am cursed. This wedding is cursed. I can't walk down that aisle tomorrow knowing the man who built my career is fighting for his life. It would be a sacrilege." And just like that, for the third time, the wedding was off. The dream of the Amalfi Coast dissolved into a nightmare of logistical chaos. Flights had to be changed, vendors had to be called, and the stunning cliffside villa became the backdrop for a funeral that had never happened. And through it all, Leo's inheritance, the tangible result of his grandfather's life's work, bled away into cancellation fees and non-refundable deposits. That night I sat on my own balcony, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach, a sick aunt, a betrayed best friend, and now a comatose manager. It was a pattern of escalating, untraceable tragedies, each one perfectly timed to detonate a wedding while leaving Serafina financially unscathed and emotionally martyred. Leo came to my room later. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I don't know what to say, Grandma." "You don't have to say anything, dear," I said, my voice softer than the rage I felt inside. "Oh, she's just devastated," he said, shaking his head. "She feels like the universe is conspiring against us." "The universe," I said slowly, choosing my words with the care of a bomb disposal expert, "is rarely so well organized. This man, her manager, what's his name?" I don't know his last name," Leo admitted. "She always just called him Julian." A manager whose last name he didn't know. A mentor whose existence was a complete mystery. The knot in my stomach tightened into a coil of ice. This wasn't a curse, it was a con, and my grandson, my dear, kind, loving grandson, was the mark. In that moment, looking at his tired, heartbroken face, the last vestiges of my hope died and something else was born in its place. A cold, clear, and absolute resolve. The librarian was done reading. It was time to write a new chapter. The flight home from Italy was the longest 8 hours of my life. I sat in my business class seat, another luxury courtesy of Leo's dwindling trust, and stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds. Beside me, Leo slept fitfully, his face etched with a stress that aged him beyond his 30 years. Serafina was in the row ahead of us, also asleep, looking for all the world like a sleeping angel, her golden hair fanned out against the plush leather seat. A sleeping viper was more like it. I didn't sleep a wink. My mind was a maelstrom of anger, sorrow, and a terrifying sense of urgency. I replayed every conversation, every excuse, every single dollar Leo had spent. It was a mountain of evidence, but it was all circumstantial. It was a feeling, an instinct. How do you prove a feeling to a man who is willfully blind? When we got back, the charade continued. Serafina sequestered herself in Leo's apartment, supposedly too grief-stricken to see anyone. Leo became her full-time caregiver, catering to her every whim, fetching her tea, and fielding concerned calls from the friends who had been at the non-wedding. He relayed updates to me in a hushed, reverent tone. "Julian is still unconscious. The doctors are saying it's not looking good." A week passed. I decided to try a different approach, one of gentle inquiry. I called Leo and invited him over for dinner, just the two of us. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. He arrived looking thin and pale. I made his favorite meal, a pot roast, just like I used to when he was a boy. We ate in comfortable silence for a while before I broached the subject. "Leo, dear," I began, my voice even. "I was thinking about Serafina's manager, Julian. It's just so awful. Which hospital is he in? I'd like to send some flowers on behalf of our family." Leo shifted in his chair. "Oh no, Grandma, you don't have to do that. Serafina said his family is very private and they're not accepting any visitors or gifts. It's a very sensitive situation." The same excuse she used for the sick aunt. My patience, a virtue I had cultivated for nearly 8 decades, began to fray. "I see, and has she been to visit him?" "She can't bring herself to," he said defensively. "She says seeing him hooked up to all those machines would break her. She's communicating directly with his family for updates." "Which family member?" I pressed, my tone sharper than I intended. "Does this person have a name?" "Grandma, why are you interrogating me?" Leo snapped, putting his fork down. "Can't you just be supportive? Serafina is going through hell, I'm going through hell, and you're acting like a detective." "Maybe a detective is what this family needs," I retorted, the words escaping before I could stop them. "3 canceled weddings, Leo. Over $1 million of your inheritance, of your grandfather's legacy gone. And every time there is a dramatic, unverifiable tragedy starring a person we've never met and whose full name we don't even know. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" His face hardened. "You've never liked her, that's what this is about. You've been looking for a reason to tear her down since the day I brought her home." "That is not true," I said, my voice trembling slightly with the force of my conviction. "I have been looking for a reason to trust her. I have been praying for one. She has given me nothing but flimsy stories and a mountain of receipts for your money." "It's my money to spend," he shouted, his voice cracking. I love her. Why is that so hard for you to understand? I'd spend every last penny to make her happy, to protect her from pain. But who is protecting you, Leo? I asked, my voice now a whisper. Well, he stood up high, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I don't have to listen to this. He walked to the door, his back rigid with anger. I thought you, of all people, would be on my side. Robert would be so disappointed in you. He left, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed in the silent house. Robert's name used as a weapon against me was the final blow. I sank back into my chair, the pot roast growing cold on the table. He was wrong. Robert would not be disappointed in me. Robert was a man who valued truth above all else. He would have seen right through Serafina's shimmering facade in a heartbeat. He would have been methodical, logical, and relentless in protecting his own. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my home pressing in on me. I felt utterly alone, isolated by my grandson's misplaced loyalty. I looked at the portrait of Robert on the mantelpiece, his kind, steady eyes seeming to meet mine. I had made a promise to him on his deathbed, a quiet promise that I would always watch over our family. I was failing him. I was failing Leo. My gentleness had failed, my reason had failed. Leo was trapped in an emotional prison and Serafina held the key. I couldn't pick the lock with kindness, I needed a battering ram. My gaze fell upon the old, leather-bound address book on my desk. I hadn't opened it in years, but I knew exactly whose name was inside. My fingers traced the worn gold lettering on the cover. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate, and walked to the desk. I flipped through the brittle pages, past faded ink and crossed-out addresses until I found the entry I was looking for. Venge Arthur. The ink was almost 30 years old. Arthur had been Robert's best friend, his golfing buddy, and for a brief time after his retirement from the police force, a private investigator. They had lost touch in Robert's final years, but I knew Arthur was still around. He was a man as solid and as unshakable as the truth itself. He was stubborn, cynical, and had a nose for lies that was second to none. He was, in short, everything I needed. My hand was steady as I picked up the phone and dialed the number. It rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when a gruff, familiar voice answered. Avenger. Arthur, I said, my voice clear and strong. It's Maggie Caldwell. There was a pause on the other end, then a softening in his tone. Maggie, good Lord, it's been a long time. Is everything all right? No, Arthur, I said, looking at Robert's portrait. It's not. I need your help. I need to hire you. Arthur Finch lived in the same modest brick bungalow he'd owned for 50 years, a relic from a time when a detective's salary could afford a man a piece of the American dream. The inside was a time capsule, dark wood paneling, worn leather furniture, and the faint, pleasant smell of pipe tobacco and old books. Arthur himself had aged like a good whiskey, his face a roadmap of hard-earned laugh lines and thoughtful furrows. At 75, his eyes, behind a pair of thick spectacles, were as sharp as they'd ever been. He poured me a cup of tea, his movements practiced and calm, and listened without interruption as I laid out the entire sordid saga. I told him everything: the sick aunt, the betrayed friend, the comatose manager. I recounted the missing details, the evasive answers, the astronomical sums of money that had simply vanished. I confessed my fears, my confrontation with Leo, and the terrible feeling of helplessness that had driven me to his door. When I finished, he took a slow sip of his tea, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. Robert would be spinning in his grave, he finally said, his voice a low rumble. He never did have any patience for grifters. She's a professional, Arthur, I said. She's so good at it that she has Leo convinced he's the hero in her tragic opera. They're the worst kind, he nodded, setting his cup down. The ones who sell you a fantasy and make you pay for the privilege of believing it. All right, Maggie, I'm officially retired, you know. My skills are a bit rusty. I doubt that, I said. Some things you don't forget, like how to spot a liar. A slow smile spread across his face. True enough, so the girl's name is Serafina Monet, 28 years old, social media influencer. And the latest phantom is a business manager named Julian, no last name. It's not much to go on, but it's a start. What will you do? I asked. Old school stuff mostly, he said, leaning back in his chair. A lot of this newfangled internet sleuthing is just a digital version of what we used to do on foot. I'll start with the basics. A deep background check, financial records, credit history, property deeds, DMV records. People like this, they always leave a paper trail. They might change their names, but they can't change their date of birth or their social security number so easily. He told me he would need a retainer for his services and operational expenses. I wrote him a check from my own personal savings, a sum that made me flinch, but it was nothing compared to what Leo had lost. It felt good, strangely empowering, to be spending money on the truth for a change. The first few days were quiet. Arthur called me with small, incremental updates. Her credit history is pristine, he reported on day 2. Almost too pristine, no debt, a few high-limit credit cards, all paid on time, all opened within the last 3 years. Before that, it's like she didn't exist. Then on the 4th day, he called with the first real crack in her facade. I found something. There's no record of a Serafina Monet existing anywhere in the United States before she was 25. No birth certificate, no school records, nothing. Her social security number was issued just 3 years ago. How is that possible? I asked, my heart starting to beat a little faster. It's possible if Serafina Monet isn't her real name, Arthur said, his voice grim. I ran a search for women with her date of birth and place of birth, which she listed on her driver's license as Omaha, Nebraska. I cross-referenced it with name change petitions filed in that state around 3 years ago, and I got a hit. I held my breath. Her name, Arthur said slowly, was Jennifer Peterson. Jennifer Peterson. It was such a plain, ordinary name. It was the name of a girl from Nebraska, not a glamorous influencer on the Amalfi Coast. It was the name of a person, not a brand. What else did you find? I asked. This is where it gets interesting, Arthur continued. Jennifer Peterson has a history. A few years ago, she was briefly engaged to a man in Omaha, a young heir to a local construction fortune. They had a big engagement party, she was given access to his accounts to plan the wedding, and then she disappeared right after he'd made all the major deposits. The family was too embarrassed to press charges. They just wanted to make it go away. My blood ran cold. It was the same pattern, a dress rehearsal for what she was doing to Leo. Keep digging, Arthur, I said, my voice low. I want to know everything. Arthur's investigation intensified. He was a bloodhound on a scent. He tracked Jennifer Peterson's, or rather Serafina's, digital footprint backwards. He found old, deleted social media profiles under her real name. The pictures were of a completely different person, a mousy-haired girl with a sullen expression, posing in front of a rundown house. There was no sign of the glamorous life she portrayed now. He delved into public records, tracking her movements from Nebraska to Nevada, then to California, where she had reinvented herself as Serafina Monet. Each move seemed to coincide with her meeting a new, well-off man. The breakthrough, the piece of evidence that would become the cornerstone of our entire case, came a week later. Arthur called me, his voice electric with discovery. Maggie, you're not going to believe this. I was looking into property records in Clark County, Nevada. On a whim, I searched for Jennifer Peterson, and I found it, a marriage certificate, dated 4 years ago. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. She's married. As far as the state of Nevada is concerned, she certainly is, Arthur confirmed. To a man named Ricardo Diaz. According to the address on the certificate, he's a long-haul truck driver. There's no record of a divorce, ever. She wasn't just a grifter. She wasn't just a con artist. She was a bigamist. She was playing a game so dangerous, so audacious, that it took my breath away. All those canceled weddings weren't just about stealing deposit money. They were a necessary part of the scam. She could never actually go through with a marriage to Leo because she was already legally bound to someone else. I felt a dizzying mix of emotions. There was the vindication of knowing my instincts had been right all along, but that was overshadowed by a profound, gut-wrenching sorrow for my grandson. He hadn't just fallen in love with a liar, he'd fallen in love with a ghost, a carefully constructed fiction. The woman he adored didn't even exist, and now I held the power to make that ghost disappear forever. The only question was how. For 2 days, I lived with the explosive knowledge of Serafina's secret marriage. The marriage certificate, a scanned copy of which Arthur had emailed me, sat like a ticking bomb on my computer screen. Jennifer Peterson and Ricardo Diaz joined in holy matrimony at a 24-hour chapel in Las Vegas. It was so tawdry, so cheap, so utterly at odds with the bespoke, luxury image Serafina had cultivated. My first instinct was to print it out, march over to Leo's apartment, and slap it down on the table in front of them both. To watch the mask fall from her face and the scales fall from his eyes. But in his quiet wisdom, counseled patience. A cornered animal is a dangerous animal, Maggie, he warned me over the phone. If you confront her privately, she'll spin it. She'll concoct a story about a youthful mistake, a quick annulment she thought went through, a wicked ex who's blackmailing her. She will make herself the victim one last time, and Leo might just be foolish enough to believe her. You have one shot at this. You have to make it count. The exposure needs to be absolute and undeniable. He was right. A private confrontation would just be my word against her tears. I needed to dismantle her entire public persona, the very foundation of her power. Serafina wasn't just deceiving Leo. She was deceiving her thousands of online followers, the brands who occasionally sent her free products, the small circle of socialites she was so desperate to impress. Her life was a house of cards, and I needed to pull out the bottom one in a way that would make the entire structure collapse for everyone to see. Arthur continued his work with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just an investigator anymore, he was a co-conspirator. He managed to track down Ricardo Diaz, the husband. He found him in a dusty town in Arizona. Arthur hired a local PI to make a discreet approach. The story Ricardo told was both sad and simple. He had met Jenny Peterson when she was a waitress at a truck stop diner. He was lonely and she was beautiful and paid attention to him. They had a whirlwind romance, and on a whim during one of his layovers, they got married in Vegas. 2 months later, he came home from a long haul to find the apartment empty. She had cleaned out their joint bank account, which contained his entire life savings of $7,000, and disappeared without a word. He was heartbroken and too ashamed to ever tell anyone he'd been played so badly. He never had the money or the know-how to track her down and file for a formal divorce. As far as he knew, he was still a married man. Arthur managed to get a signed, notarized affidavit from him, complete with a photo of him and Jenny on their wedding day. The next piece of the puzzle was the man from Omaha, the heir to the construction fortune. His name was Bradley Thorne. Arthur, using his old police contacts, found a way to get a message to him. At first, the Thorne family was resistant, wanting nothing to do with the scandal, but Arthur was persuasive. He framed it as an act of public service, a way to prevent this woman from ruining another family. Eventually, Bradley Thorne agreed to provide a statement detailing his experience. The whirlwind romance, the elaborate wedding plans, the sudden disappearance after all the deposits were paid. He even had text messages and emails from Jennifer that were eerily similar to the kinds of things Serafina said to Leo. We now had a dossier, a file of irrefutable proof that would not just expose a lie but obliterate an entire identity. We had her real name, her real history, a jilted fiancé, and a secret husband. We had everything we needed. During this time, I had to play my own part. I had to maintain a veneer of normalcy with Leo. I called him a few times, keeping my voice gentle, apologizing for our fight. I didn't mention Serafina. I asked about his work. I told him I missed him. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, acting the part of the chastened, supportive grandmother while secretly assembling the weapons that would shatter his world. But I knew it was a necessary cruelty. The short, sharp pain of the truth would be infinitely better than a long, slow bleed of his spirit and his fortune. The opportunity for what Arthur called the absolute exposure came from Serafina herself. One evening, Leo called me, his voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "Great news, Grandma. Serafina is feeling so much better. She said the support from everyone has been so healing. And her manager, Julian, he's awake. He's out of the coma and is expected to make a full recovery." I nearly dropped the phone, the audacity of it, the casual, almost effortless way she resolved her fictional tragedies. "Oh, that's wonderful news, dear," I managed to say. And to thank everyone for their support and to, celebrate a new beginning, she's throwing a party, he continued, bubbling with enthusiasm. She's calling it her rebirth party. It's going to be at that new rooftop lounge downtown Lucille. She wants to clear the air, put all the bad luck behind us, and she really, really wants you to be there. She wants to personally apologize for how things have been. A rebirth party, paid for by Leo, of course. It was perfect. It was a stage of her own making. She was inviting an audience to witness her resurrection, not knowing they were about to witness her execution instead. "Of course I'll be there, Leo," I said, a cold resolve settling over me. I wouldn't miss it for the world. After I hung up the phone, I called Arthur. "She's throwing a party," I told him. I could almost hear the grim smile in his voice. "Is she now? How thoughtful of her. Send me the details. It's showtime." The week leading up to the rebirth party was a masterclass in controlled strategy. Arthur and I operated like seasoned generals planning a campaign. The objective was clear: to dismantle Serafina Monet's life with surgical precision, leaving no room for doubt, no avenue for escape, and no possibility for her to rebrand herself as a victim. Our command center was my quiet living room, the same room where I had hosted Leo's childhood birthday parties. Now the coffee table was littered not with cake and presents, but with documents that felt as potent as explosives. A copy of the Nevada marriage certificate, Ricardo Diaz's notarized affidavit with the wedding photo attached, and Bradley Thorne's detailed statement from Omaha. "The key is the delivery," Arthur said, pacing slowly in front of the fireplace. "We can't just storm in and start shouting. This needs to unfold like a play. We control the narrative, we build the tension, we deliver the climax." Our first step was to prepare what Arthur called the packages. He had a contact at a high-end printing shop. We created 20 identical, elegant-looking portfolios. On the cover, in tasteful gold script, were the words, "The True Story of Serafina Monet." Inside each portfolio was a carefully curated set of documents: a clean copy of the marriage certificate, the affidavit from Ricardo Diaz, and the statement from Bradley Thorne. We also included a before picture of Jennifer Peterson from her old, deleted social media, placed side by side with a glamorous after shot of Serafina Monet from her current Instagram. The visual contrast was jarring and undeniable. "Who are these for?" I asked, looking at the stack of handsome, deadly portfolios. "For the audience," Arthur said. "Her influencer friends, any brand representatives she might have invited, the society bloggers she's trying to court. When the time is right, we hand them out. It ensures the information spreads instantly and accurately. No one can claim they misheard you. They'll be holding the proof in their hands." The plan was for me to be the one to speak. Arthur insisted on it. "It has to be you, Maggie. You're the grandmother. You're the matriarch protecting her family. Your words will have a moral weight that mine never could. I'll be there, right by your side, but you need to be the one to deliver the blow." I was terrified. I was a retired librarian, not a public prosecutor. My life was spent in the quiet company of books, not in the spotlight of a public confrontation. But then I thought of Leo, of his grandfather's legacy being squandered, of his good heart being so cruelly exploited. The fear didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a powerful, protective rage. I would do it for them. We rehearsed it. Arthur played the part of the skeptical audience, grilling me, trying to trip me up. I learned my lines, which were simply the unadorned facts. I learned to present the story not with anger, but with a cold, sorrowful certainty. The narrative had to be that of a heartbroken grandmother forced to take drastic measures to save her grandson from a predator. The final piece of our plan involved Leo himself. It was the most difficult part. I knew the public humiliation would be devastating for him, a pain I would have given anything to spare him. But he had to be there. He had to see it for himself, to hear the truth in a context where Serafina's tears and manipulations would be powerless. It was, as Arthur put it, a necessary amputation to save the patient. The night of the party, I dressed with care. I chose a simple, elegant black dress. I wore the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our 40th anniversary. I needed its weight, its sense of history to ground me. Arthur arrived at my house looking dapper in a dark suit, a handsome leather briefcase in his hand. Inside it were the 20 portfolios. He looked more like a visiting professor than an avenging angel. "Ready, Maggie?" he asked gently. So I took a deep breath and looked at the portrait on the mantel. "For Robert," I whispered, then turning to Arthur, I nodded. "I'm ready." We drove to the rooftop lounge Lucille. The city lights glittered below us like a carpet of scattered diamonds. It was a world of glamour and illusion, Serafina's natural habitat. As we stepped out of the elevator and into the thrumming, fashionable crowd, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I was an intruder in this world, an old woman armed with nothing but the truth. And I knew with absolute certainty that it would be enough. We found a small table near the back, a strategic position from which to observe, and to wait for the perfect moment to burn it all down. Lucille was exactly as superficial as I had imagined. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the sound of brittle laughter. Young, beautiful people posed for selfies against the glittering skyline, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. In the center of it all was Serafina, the star of her own show. She was wearing a shimmering silver dress that caught the light with every move, and she drifted through the crowd like a queen, bestowing air kisses and radiant smiles. Leo was by her side, looking proud and relieved. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a warm, grateful smile, clearly happy that I had come. It felt like a knife in my heart, knowing I was about to destroy that happiness. But it was a false happiness, a house built on sand, and the tide was coming in. Arthur and I sat at our table, nursing glasses of sparkling water, observing. He had placed the leather briefcase on the empty chair beside him. We waited for about an hour, letting the party reach its peak. Finally, Serafina clinked a spoon against her champagne flute, calling for everyone's attention. "Hi, everyone," she said, her voice amplified by a microphone. "Thank you all so much for coming to my little rebirth party. It means the world to me. As many of you know, the last year has been challenging." She gave a little self-deprecating laugh. "It felt like I was living under a dark cloud, but thanks to the love and support of all of you, and especially of my amazing fiancé, Leo." She beamed at him, and he beamed back. "The storm has passed." The crowd applauded politely. This was my cue. Arthur gave me a subtle nod. "And now that my mentor Julian is recovering," she continued, "I feel like I can finally breathe again. This party is about leaving the past behind and celebrating a bright new future." As the applause swelled again, I stood up. My movement was quiet, but in a room where everyone was focused on the stage, it was enough to draw a few curious glances. Arthur stood with me, picking up the briefcase. We began to walk slowly and deliberately toward the front of the room. The crowd parted for us, a mixture of confusion and irritation on their faces. Who was this old woman interrupting the party? Serafina's smile faltered for a fraction of a second as she saw us approaching. Leo's face registered pure confusion. I stopped a few feet from her, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm against my ribs. I didn't need the microphone. My voice, though not loud, was clear and carried the authority of my age and my conviction. "That's a lovely story, Serafina," I began, my tone calm and even. "A story of rebirth. I'd like to tell a story, too. It's also about a rebirth of sorts. It's about a young woman from Omaha, Nebraska, who was reborn as someone new." A murmur went through the crowd. Serafina's face went pale beneath her expert makeup. "Grandma, what are you doing?" Leo hissed, stepping toward me. I held up a hand, not looking at him, my eyes locked on Serafina. "This woman's name was Jennifer Peterson," I continued. "A plain name for a plain girl with big dreams. She dreamed of a life of luxury, a life she didn't want to work for, so she found an easier way. She found a kind young man, an heir to a fortune, Bradley Thorne." At the mention of the name, a flicker of genuine panic crossed Serafina's eyes. She got engaged to him, planned a lavish wedding entirely on his dime, and then disappeared just before the ceremony, after all the non-refundable deposits had been paid. A tragic, unavoidable circumstance, of course. My voice was laced with ice. While I spoke, Arthur moved silently through the stunned crowd. He began opening his briefcase and handing the elegant portfolios to the most influential-looking guests. The ones with the largest cameras, the most followers, the ones who looked like they wrote for society blogs. After that, I went on, my voice gaining strength as I saw the dawning horror on Serafina's face. Jennifer Peterson vanished, and in her place, the glamorous Serafina Monet was born. She came to California and found my grandson, and the pattern began again. A canceled wedding due to a sick aunt no one ever met. A second canceled wedding due to a betrayed friend. And a third, in Italy, canceled because of a comatose manager named Julian, who, miraculously, seems to have recovered without a single public record of his hospital stay. People in the crowd were now opening the portfolios. I could hear gasps. The clicking of phone cameras began, not aimed at Serafina's smiling face, but at the documents in their hands. I'm sure you're all wondering what kind of terrible luck could cause 3 weddings to be canceled, I said, my voice ringing with clarity. But it wasn't luck, it was a logistical necessity. Because you see, a woman can't marry my grandson when she is already married to someone else. I paused to let the words land. The silence on the rooftop was absolute, broken only by the distant sounds of the city below. I'd like to introduce you all to Ricardo Diaz, I said, my gaze sweeping the room before landing back on the frozen figure of Serafina. A truck driver from Arizona. Serafina, or should I say Jennifer, married him 4 years ago in a chapel in Las Vegas. She took his life savings and disappeared. The marriage was never dissolved. For those of you who are interested, the proof is in the portfolios you're holding. The marriage certificate, a signed statement from Mr. Diaz, and even a photograph from their happy day. Leo, who had been standing beside her like a statue, finally turned to look at her. The adoration in his eyes had been replaced by a dawning, sickening comprehension. "Serafina," he whispered, his voice cracking, "is this true?" She stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The charming influencer was gone. The radiant queen was gone. All that was left was Jennifer Peterson from Omaha, a cornered thief with nowhere left to run. All the pretty words, all the tears, all the manufactured drama, they were useless now. The truth was out, documented, and distributed. She didn't answer him. She just turned and fled, pushing her way through the stunned crowd, a chorus of camera clicks following her every step. Her perfect, curated life had been turned to ash in a matter of minutes. I walked over to Leo. He was staring at the space where she had been, his face a mask of utter devastation. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it made my own heart ache. I didn't say "I told you so." I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around my grandson, and for the first time in a very long time, he let me hold him. That night, the story of Serafina Monet, the bigamist influencer, went viral. It was on every blog, every gossip site. Her social media empire crumbled overnight. Her sponsors dropped her. Her so-called friends disavowed her. She became a pariah, a cautionary tale. Justice, it turned out, could be as swift and as brutal as a trending topic. Leo was broken for a time. He had to grieve not for a person, but for a fantasy he had loved so dearly. It was a painful healing process, but he was resilient. He was a Caldwell, and he had his grandfather's strength in his bones. We talked for hours, days. He apologized. I apologized. We rebuilt our bond, this time on the solid foundation of a difficult truth. He eventually managed to recover some of the money through legal channels, but the real recovery was in his spirit. He is more cautious now, wiser. He is whole again. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, airing our family's pain in such a public forum. A part of me, the quiet librarian, cringes at the spectacle, but the grandmother in me knows it was the only way. Some poisons can't be drawn out gently, they have to be excised completely for all to see to ensure they can never fester again. I did it to protect my grandson and to honor my husband's legacy. Love isn't always soft and gentle. Sometimes the most profound act of love is to go to war.